And if you do that, you'll guarantee the solvency of Social Security farther than the eye can see.
The answer is yes. I'm probably the only one up here who's going to say that. But the truth of the matter is, you've stated it. You're either going to cut benefits or you're going to go ahead and raise taxes above the first $97,000. And by the way, I was in that room with Pat Moynihan. It was Joe Biden, Pat Moynihan, Bob Dole. It was also George Mitchell when we made that deal. I'll never forget Bob Dole turning to Pat Moynihan and saying we all got to jump in this boat at the same time. So the bottom line here is you can't do it by growing the economy alone. So I would raise the cap.
Would you also, considering now life expectancy is 78, consider gradually raising the retirement age?
Now, we did that once. I supported that. That's what got it solvent to 2041. By simply going and raising the cap, you can solve the problem.
Senator Clinton, would you be in favor of saying to the American people, I'm going to tax your income, I'm not going to cap it at $97,500. Everyone, even if you're a millionaire, is going to pay Social Security tax on every cent they make?
Well, Tim, let me tell you what I think about this, because I know this is a particular concern of yours, but I want to make 3 points very briefly. First, I do think that it's important to talk about fiscal responsibility. You know, when my husband left office after moving us toward a balanced budget and a surplus, we had a plan to make Social Security solvent until 2055. Now, because of the return to deficits, we've lost 14 years of solvency. It's now projected to be solvent until 2041. Getting back on a path to fiscal responsibility is absolutely essential. Number two, I think we do need another bipartisan process. You described what happened in '83. It took presidential leadership, and it took the relationships between the White House and Capitol Hill to reach the kind of resolution that was discussed. And I think that has to be what happens again, but with a president who is dedicated to Social Security, unlike our current president, who has never liked Social Security. You can go back and see when he first ran for Congress, he was dissing Social Security. So when I'm president, I will do everything to protect and preserve Social Security so we can have that kind of bipartisanship. And finally, then you can look in the context of fiscal responsibility and of a bipartisan compromise, what else might be done. But I think if you don't put fiscal responsibility first, you're going to really make a big mistake, because we demonstrated in the 90s it had a lot to do with moving us towards solvency.
But you would not take lifting the cap at 97.5 off the table?
Well, I take everything off the table until we move toward fiscal responsibility and before we have a bipartisan process. I don't think I should be negotiating about what I would do as president. You know, I want to see what other people come to the table with.
But Senator Biden said you can't grow your way out of this, and for the record, when the Clinton administration left office, Social Security was only guaranteed to 2038, not 2055.
There was a plan on the basis of the balanced budget and the surplus to take it all the way to 2055. And we know what happened. George Bush came in, went back to deficits, and has basically used the Social Security Trust Fund and borrowing from China and other countries to pay for the war.
A simple question. What do you put on the table? What are you willing to look at to say, we're not going to double the taxes, we're not going to cut benefits in half, I'm willing to put everything on the table, some things on the table, nothing on the table?
I'm not putting anything on the proverbial table until we move toward fiscal responsibility. I think it's a mistake to do that.
Senator Obama?
I think that lifting the cap is probably going to be the best option. Now, we've got to have a process that's already been talked about. Joe participated back in 1983. We need another one. And I think, I've said before, everything should be on the table. My personal view is that lifting the cap is much preferable to the other options that are available. But what's critical is to recognize that there is a potential problem. As I travel around Iowa and New Hampshire, I meet young people who don't think Social Security is going to be there for them. They don't believe it's going to be there for them. And I think it's important for us, in addition to getting our fiscal house in order, to acknowledge as Democrats that there may be a problem that we've got to take on, and we should be willing to do anything that will strengthen the system to make sure that we are being true to the sacred trust of those who are already retired as well as young people in the future, and we should reject things that will weaken the system, including privatization, which essentially is going to put people's retirement at the whim of the stock market.
Senator Dodd, tax all income?
I don't think you have to go that far. I understand what Joe's point is here, but you could raise that tax far less than all incomes here and achieve the same result by achieving solvency. But beyond just the Social Security fix, Tim, There are a host of other issues related to this. Pension security is critically important for long-term security. Financial literacy is critically important to people as well. Prescription drug issues are critically important to that population. Preventive care. We need to look at this in a holistic way when it comes to our seniors. Remember, it was only a few years ago, Tim, that the poorest sector of our population in this country were our elderly. Because of Medicare, because of Social Security, because of leadership that stood up and fought for it here, we've been able to take the older Americans out of poverty and give them a sense of decency and a quality of life. So issues like privatization, as has been said here, have to be off the table, and I believe you can achieve that solvency here by doing simpler things without the draconian measures that some have suggested. But you need to also deal with these other issues on the table if you're going to provide that kind of financial security and that quality of life for our older Americans.
Governor Richardson, would you lift the cap and have taxes paid on income and not cap it at $97,000?
No, you don't need to do that. That's a 15% tax on small businesses, on the middle class, on family farms. You don't need to do that. This is what you do. One, you take privatization off the table. You don't want Social Security in the stock market. Two, you stop raiding the Social Security Trust Fund, as the Congress and the President constantly do.
You would then have a,
Number three.
Excuse me. You would then would have a deficit of over $300 billion.
No, Tim. No,
Governor,
you don't. No, wait, because I know this.
It's not funny money. It's real money.
No, but what you